Did you know that this channel actually follows some kind of bigger narrative, just like a good role-playing game does? No? Well, that's because I never told anyone and because it wasn't planned that way. Now, the channel has reached 2000 subscribers earlier this summer, and that's why I think it is the right time to share its storyline with you. Welcome to the 8-Bit Theory. The original goal of this channel was to document my process of creating a game for the Commodore 128. I found it interesting because there are not a lot of games for that computer, plus I wanted to explore the underappreciated VDC graphics chip. The VDC chip does not feature sprite capabilities and it does not let you work with raster interrupts, for example, but it comes with dedicated video RAM and double the horizontal resolution. For the type of game I intended to create, that was all I thought was needed. Speaking in RPG terms, creating that game is definitely the main quest of this channel. And the first 10 videos or so have just been dealing with exactly this. Oh, what game am I talking about? It is supposed to be a demake of the game The Guild, which was published in 2002. That is a simulation game about you running your medieval business, becoming rich, and being the founder of a dynasty. Simulation games were big in the 1980s and 1990s on the Commodore 8-bit computers, but maybe mainly in German-speaking regions of the world. I don't know. Now, The Guild came in 2002, and it was one of the first business simulations that moved beyond the traditional turn-based board game approach to game design. While the game still takes place in turns, one turn is one season of the year, and that turn happens in real time. So producing goods takes a couple of minutes but not a full turn. Transporting them to the marketplace also takes a couple of minutes, and so on. When I played that for the first time in the early 2000s, I found that very interesting. It was a different gameplay experience, and when looking at it from a single player perspective, it was a lot more fun. So I wanted to find out whether this can also be done on a Commodore 128. When looking at the specifications of the Guild, this means a 6502 compatible CPU versus a Pentium 2, 2 MHz versus 400 MHz, 128 kilobytes of RAM plus 64 kilobytes of video RAM versus 64 megabytes of RAM and 16 megabytes of video RAM. And finally, 640 by 200 resolution versus at least 800 by 600. That comparison looks ridiculous, I know, but let's remove the 3D aspect and only concentrate on what the player needs to be able to do to fully cover the gameplay loop. And that means hire workers, assign them to crafting specific goods, manage storage space, purchase resources, sell the goods produced, and so on. So 3D aside, the only difference to earlier games was the real-time aspect. So over the course of 10 episodes, I was working on these core gameplay mechanics in Commodore Basic 7. I put a lot of focus on how the data is stored, how the real-time mechanics work, and how to create the text-only user interface. I didn't intend to keep this text-only, I just wanted to focus on a proof of concept, whether the C128 would have the memory and processing power that was needed to make that real-time game loop work. And as far as I can say, it does work. However, as with any good RPG, I was more than happy to be distracted by side quests, and if done right, side quests totally add to the main quest. And that's also basically what has happened here. I came to the conclusion that text only didn't do the C128 justice. Actually, the VDC chip has a dedicated bitmap mode, and I'm convinced that this makes the C128 the best 8-bit RPG and simulation machine that no one knows about. But while I have more than 15 years of experience as a programmer under my sombrero and more than 25 years in the industry in general, I was still lacking the technical insights on the VDC chip. So I went off on a series of side quests to change that. None of them directly deal with the making of the game, but all of them made me more experienced in working with the VDC. During this time, I discovered the VDC Basic extension. It does not care so much about drawing lines and circles and graphic primitives. It solely focuses on leveraging the hardware capabilities of the VDC chip, and that is block fill, block copy, and data transfer between RAM and VRAM. Instead of painfully peeking and poking the VDC's registers to get something done, VDC Basic is implemented in assembly language and provides new keywords for all of these functions. With that abstraction layer in place, it's no longer painful to work with the VDC chip. Sure, you will need to deal with the memory layout and need to be a lot more technical than the regular BASIC programmer, but as I said, it was no longer painful. And most of all, it was a lot faster than what the regular Joe expected from that chip. And that knowledge, or should I say, that skill, brought along the next side quest. With theoretical knowledge of the VDC's capabilities and VDC Basic in my tool belt, I wanted to show that the C128 is on par with the IBM XT when it comes to not a card games, like role-playing games. So I started to recreate the PC's EGA Ultima 4 opening sequence on the 128. I saw that VDC Basic's primitive operations are fine, but for more complex graphics operations, multiple basic commands needed to be executed in sequence, and as we all know, basic performance is a bottleneck. So I went out and added some features to VDC Basic, like adding parameters that allow VDC Basic to draw a full tile with one command instead of just one line of a tile. 2 videos about the Ultima 4 intro sequence already exist, a third one to conclude that intro sequence is still missing, that would deal with the characters walking around the map and fighting. But winter of that year came to an end and work on it slowed down. A different side quest would capture my interest for the summer to follow. I got myself a laser cutter and I was fascinated by the idea to create cases for retrocomputer equipment out of wood. While 3D printers got my attention for a short amount of time, I wasn't really happy with the experience. Not because they are complicated, that's fine, but because it's so hard to have good results that are reproducible, even when you didn't turn on your printer for like 2 months. The laser cutter is much easier to handle, but of course with all the gluing and painting involved, it's a completely different challenge. But I was able to create a decent 1581 case that only needs a very little number of screws. With that completed, yet another topic caught my interest, and the storyline goes back to programming. Some people on Forum 64 compete in small competitions 4 or 5 times a year. For these, I started to create achievement certificates a while ago, using the C64 program PrintFox. As dozens of certificates have to be created for a competition, it's one per player and each game he competed in, this was a very time-consuming task, so I created a piece of software on the C128 that automatically takes ranks from a CSV file and combines all the required graphics assets, which are stored in dedicated smaller files, into certificates. For the RLE encoding, which is required for the file types, I used the C128 microcompiler I also created a video about. That was shared on an experimental channel when I still wasn't sure about how to deal with multiple language content in the best way. So there has been some updates to that piece of software since then. Let me know if you're interested in that. I can think of an updated English version here on this channel. Also, these certificates always had QR codes on them, so you could print that out and just use your mobile to visit the competition's forum thread. These QR codes were usually created on the PC and converted to a PrintFox compatible format by using Godot, probably the most sophisticated image processing software for the C64. Now, I wanted to know how much processing power goes into creating a QR code, and that was the next side quest. It took me a very long 2 months, but the outcome was a QR code generator in 6502 assembly language. It requires about 5 kilobytes of RAM and takes about half a second to generate such a code. That generator even made it onto intro disk number 4 for the Mega 65, which I'm kind of proud of. Now look at this. In this video the QR code is scanned, which leads to my QR code video being shown on the phone in this video. And now I am creating a video showing that video, showing my... Great, right?
I just put my phone down because it was making a bunch of noise. You take your phone, you scan that really cool 8-bit QR code, and it takes you right to the reference, which is super cool, right? Oh, speaking of X16, let's check that out. But it takes you right there, and then you can play. Can I do this backwards?
The C128 or the WIC20 encode QR code. A big shout out to the retroCombs YouTube channel for covering this. Also, user ISS on the Oric community made the QR code generator work as part of the Oric toolset. The Oric is a not so well-known 6502 based computer from back in the day, but they also have some interesting projects going on. For example, this fairly recent remake of the game Encounter. So if you're interested in everything 6502, make sure to also check that out. But back to the QR code generator. In my video I mentioned a C version. This took 60 seconds to generate the QR code. I reached out to Dr. Model Wombat after that. He is the maintainer of the Oscar 64C compiler. And while that still takes about 20 kilobytes of memory, the execution speed was reduced to about 10 seconds instead of 60. So if you are interested in C programming for Commodore 8-bit machines, definitely give Oscar 64 a try. And I have one more project to share that picked up on that topic. After the QR code video, Yannis reached out to me and we started to have regular conversations. He has been working on an AIS decoder for the C128 for quite some time at that point. AIS is short for Automatic Identification System, and it's the protocol that's used by ships to permanently share their position via radio. And what can be more fun for people like us than a bunch of bytes that represents interesting data? So the C128 decodes this by using machine language routines. And the visualization happens on the VDC display and was written in Walrus Basic 8, another piece of 8-bit history that's rarely seen being used, especially today. Now, part of the AIS data is the MMSI, which is a vessel's ID basically. And websites like marinetraffic.com provide information for these IDs. So we made the QR code generator ready for Yannis' existing code base, and now his program on the C128 is not just an isolated piece of tech that displays position data, quite beautifully by the way, but by scanning the QR code you can easily bridge the gap between your offline C128 and the online world. For more technical details on this, please check out Yannis' YouTube channel. You will find the link exactly where you expect it to find, promised. The QR code generator as such didn't add anything to the original main quest of this channel, but 2 months of intense assembly programming taught me a lot about that. So speaking in RPG terms, that was a lot of level grinding and brought me up to assembly language skill level 8. Or so. The next side quest I embarked on finally brought me back a tiny little closer to the main quest, and I guess that might be the point where most of today's audience already is familiar with the channel. I had been following the Mega 65's and the X16's progress for quite some time already, but they were more or less unavailable so far. By the end of last year, the X16 was released to the public and the Mega 65 became available without the extensive waiting times, so I had to get both. And as I was looking forward to them for such a long time, and I really wanted to finally know how each of these machines would do, I created a side-by-side video. That was not intended as a this versus that, by the way. I just wanted to give my view and let everyone decide which one they prefer. And I want to take the opportunity to clarify something. I got some criticism for not mentioning the Mega 65's FPGA nature. I had that in, but then I dropped it because I thought everyone knows about that anyways. But not whether your trusty Commodore disk drives would still work or that dot matrix printer. The footage you see here showing some of the Mega 65's cores was recorded back then for that side-by-side video. After the video, when thinking about why people were upset about me not saying the F word, I mean FPGA, not the other one, it suddenly dawned on me that the term Mega 65 can refer to two very different things. One is the Mega 65 FPGA platform, just the hardware that can basically run any core and be almost any computer you want it to be, but still an empty shell waiting to be filled with life. And then there is the Mega 65 as the Commodore 65 heritage project, if you want to call it that. That basic 65 computer with 40 megahertz, C64 compatibility, and the VIC-3 and VIC-4 video chip features. So just one out of many available computers on the Mega 65 FPGA platform, but for me, the one part that gives this project its soul. I did buy it as the Commodore 65 that wasn't, and I wanted to focus on that, and that's where my mistake was. Many people definitely buy it for the exact other reason. So when people talk about the Mega 65, it's a matter of context which part they are actually referring to. And it's a bit unfortunate for both of these parts that they don't have a way of clearly referring to them. If there was, I would have been able to be very clear about what I was effing on. I mean, focusing, not the other thing. With that being said, I'm looking forward to also running some of the other 8-bit Commodore cores on it, and I'm really grateful for all who are dedicating their time working on these cores. Thank you. Oh yeah, and then there also was a hiccup about the X16. The price for the keyboard was definitely not 350 euros, it was 35. Now, how did that bring me closer to the main quest? I mentioned very early on in the first videos that I would love to also bring the demake of the guild to the Mega 65 or the X16, even though the primary development target was the C128. So the motivation to get to know the Mega 65 and the X16 originated in the main quest of the 8-bit theory. Oh, and if you see me working with the Kavari on yet another side quest, it's for the same reason. Now, the Ultima 4 intro sequence already was the side quest that would allow me to improve the tooling around the VDC chip, but then another one came along, the Dungeon Crawler Game Jam 2025, and that one also brought a lot of improvements to VDC Basic. But I won't spoil anything here, a video about that is in the making and will be the next one to appear here on this channel. So, with that being said, I embarked on this journey about 3 years ago. On one hand, things have been moving slower than expected, but on the other hand, I learned so much about the Commodore 128 on the machine language level, the VDC chip, the quirks of memory management, and so on. So, while I will definitely get back to the main quest, I will deviate into side quests a lot more until then. Either because it adds to the narrative, or because I need to do some level grinding. I really enjoy every little step of this journey, and that's why the videos only come in irregular intervals. I create these as I go, and whenever I think I concluded a small quest that's worth telling a story. That won't make the 8-bit theory the algorithm's best friend, but maybe still one of your favorite channels to watch. So, if you want to be among the first ones to hear about new chapters, please make sure to subscribe. And please do share your thoughts in the comments, because that way it becomes our journey, not just mine. I guess this concludes this episode, which was very different to the rest. Still, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for walking with me. See you next time here at the 8-bit theory, when we hear the next story about technology that's obsolete but not useless.